Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel Watercolor Impressions. I've been doing series of winter paintings. I want to change it a bit this week. This reference was taken from capital city of Canada, which is Ottawa. There is a lot of inspirations from European buildings. Before we start, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And let's get started, guys. Feel free to download the drawing template and reference. Check the video description for the link. So whenever you start any kind of painting in watercolors, I'll start with a light wash, so that would be the sky. So for the sky, I'm going to be using cobalt blue, and at the bottom I'm going to introduce a little bit of warmth in it. So I'm going to be introducing yellow ochre in it. So before the sky dries down, I'm going to put another grayish greenish color in it. So I want to create like some kind of A's at the top and a little bit of gradient at the bottom. So before the sky dries out, I'm going to introduce a little bit of brownish raw amber color. So I'm putting raw amber at the top, and at the bottom I'm going to be using a little bit of neutral tint here and there, just to have a little bit of color variation in my building so that it doesn't look monotonous. Being said that, you can see in the reference the value is a little bit darker, but I want to push this like far away from our foreground building, because our foreground building and the road is our focal point in this painting. So I came to the foreground, midground, so I'm going to take a lot of water in my brush, and I'm using raw amber, and as it comes down I'm going to introduce a little bit of gradient in there with using Pion's gray and a little bit of yellow ochre in it. And you can see I'm creating a glow in the midground, and I'm also leaving a little bit of white bits for the street crossing. And I'm also putting some water in the midground where the car and the midground meets. So you'll see at the end of the painting, you will see why I did that. As a painter, you have to challenge yourself with different subjects and get familiar with. This is the second time I'm doing this kind of buildings, even though I don't have that much experience on this. Sometimes I do it and I see what I can come up with. So whenever you paint, think about that. There is no bad painting. Either the painting worked or it doesn't. So I started with the background building, although I have the values already. So I'm just like putting some different colors in there. So I put a little bit of cobalt turquoise, cerulean blue, and whatever I can see, and I put it there. And I also want to have some little bit of a shape which is against the sky. So I used a little bit of Pion's gray at the top, and at the bottom I introduced cerulean blue, watercolors, and I can imagine off. And I'm also adding a little bit of details there, and I'm also making sure that I'm not adding that many details to the background, because it's just a background for me. Now let's focus on the building in the foreground. So this is our major focal point in our painting. We're going to be spending a lot of details on this building. To get started, I used raw amber and a little bit of burnt amber in it. And I also added a little bit of granulation in my mix. But when I did it, I was super scared that I'm going to lose this painting, because when I did this wash, and it looked really horrible. And as you can see, it doesn't mix well with the paper, and I thought I lost it. But deep down, I told myself that this painting gonna work, and I kept going at it. So for the wash, I'm gonna treat this as a single shape, because there is a lot of things and buildings. In buildings, there's a lot of windows and a lot of details happening there. But you have to treat it as a single shape. Then you build up all the details later. Now I'm adding the other building, which is also against the sky. So I'm gonna connect the shape to the rest of the building. So I do this really often, turn my watercolor paper or block, and I try to mix colors as well. So I'm throwing a little bit of neutral tint, Pion's gray, and I let it bleed from bottom to the top. So this gives a beautiful illusion of light as well as a gradient and for our building. And I'm also trying to take the Pion's gray and try to mix the colors a little bit better. And I'll keep building the pigment until I'm happy with it. And I also left the white bits for the roof, because we're going to be introducing different colors for the roof. But you can imagine that it already looks like a snow for top of the roofs. So I'm taking the Pion's gray and I'm trying to mixing the colors pretty well. And I'm also throwing some waters here and there to get some little bit of texturing details in our building. So I'm going to be keep doing this until I'm happy with it. And you can also see I'm adding the details. I'm leaving a lot of room for the roof so that I don't go over it. And there's going to be, as you can see in the reference, there's a little bit of light green happening on the roofs. So now I want to connect the foreground building to our the bus in Ottawa. So in Toronto and Ottawa, they can have a similar bus color scheme, so white and red. And even though in the reference it looks super white, but I want to introduce a little bit of colors in it, so I used yellow ochre and a little bit of white paint in my brush. And for the red, I'm using cadmium orange. And I want these colors to let it bleed, so it gives a beautiful color mixing for watercolors. But as soon as it comes down, I'm going to be introducing a little bit of darker value at the ground. And for the car, I'm going to be using French ultramarine blue. And I'm also using pure pigment for it. And I left a little bit of white bits here and there for the car lighting and everything. So whenever I paint cars or any kind of like bus or anything, any kind of vehicles, I try to think of as a shape instead of thinking as a bus or a car or anything else. Before it's drying out, I'm going to be introducing a Pion's gray for the windows for the buses. And now I jumped onto the car in the midground. And for this, I'm making sure that the value is a little bit lighter. So it gives the illusion of depth in our painting. I also a little bit of darker value for the windscreen for the cars. Now let's jump on to the roofs and add some details there. Before we get on to it, I want to connect the shape of the building which connects the midground and the road in the foreground. And I also left some white bits there because there is snow deposits in there, so I just want to leave it as it is. I want to connect the shape already there, and I'm also adding a little bit of details here and there which I'm seeing in the reference as well. And in the midground I'm keeping it a little bit darker. So now let's focus on the roofs of the building. So let's focus on the mid shape of the roof. So for the mix I used Viridian and a little bit of white paint in it because I want the value to be lighter, and it also looks lighter in the reference as well. I'll keep the building so there is two kind of roofs in our reference. You could see the green roof, and there's also a darker roof which is happening as well. But when I did this, I treated it as a single shade because I don't want to get caught on details. Before it dries out, I'm going to introduce a little bit of darker pigment. I'm using Pion's gray for it, so it kind of gives the illusion of shadows in the roofs as well. Now let's mix darker pigments for the darker roof. For the darker roof, I mixed Pion's gray and a little bit of linseed crimson, so I get a little bit of color variation there. I thought of leaving when I started this roof. I thought of leaving that white bit there, but after I realized to put some details there. But when I did this shape, it looked really complicated in the reference, but I treated it as a single shape. And before it dries out, I'm adding the details using a smaller brush. So whenever you add details, make sure to, when you want to get like clear thin lines, make sure to use a small brush as well. So now I'm adding the next darker roof. As you can see, I'm changing the brush constantly. And there's also a darker shape in the clock tower. I'm also adding that as well. And at the bottom, I'm connecting the shape, and I'm also adding a roof on the right hand side of the building. So I also left this vertical shape. I forgot to add the green roof, so I'm adding that as well. And this is also against sky, so I want to make sure to read as much as really good as is possible. As you can see, before it dries out, I also add a little bit of a darker pigment at the top of that vertical tower. And I didn't like I didn't like the white bit, so I'm taking some water and I add a little bit of color there, but it does look a little bit of color variations there. And I also noticed that the bus wasn't reading properly, so I used a little bit of raw amber, a little bit of Pion's gray in it, and I mixed everything and I treated it as a single shape. So I did this step just to make the values read as broad as possible. So now let's start adding the figures. So I started the figures at the midground who was standing near the snow. And I'm also adding the details. There is also a lot of details happening in the midground, so I'm adding that as well. But when I added the details, I'm trying to keep it like impressionistic as possible, as simple. Because we want to focus on the overall painting than like focusing on one area in our painting. So I'm introducing a little bit of darker value on the right hand side, so that it creates a little bit of depth in the building. So I'm taking I covered a lot of things with my darker pigment, so I'm going to take a little bit of white paint or amber and bringing some of the details back. And there's also a pillar happening on the right hand side. I'm also doing that, and I'm also bringing a little bit of wider pigments in our building as well. Now let's start adding the figures in our painting. When you add figures, there is one rule of thumb you guys can keep in mind. Having different colors and different patterns for the figures. What I mean by that is, if you make one figure darker and make other figure lighter, or if you make one figure warmer, make the other figure cooler. So that way you have a little bit of color variation, as well as a little bit of variations of people in your painting. This thing I learned it from the book called Andrew Loomis by Natural Way to Paint, or Painter's Eye. And it's a pretty good book, and every painter should read that book, and you will gain a lot of knowledge from it as well. So since it's in the foreground, I want to have that foreground platform to be darker as well. For that, I'm mixing a lot of dirt in my palette, like burnt amber, alizarin crimson, burnt amber, a little bit of gradient, and Pion's gray. And I also want that cars to be anchoring on the ground, so I'm adding a little bit of a darker pigment at the bottom of the cars using Pion's gray and a little bit of French ultramarine blue in it. So same thing for the car in the foreground, and same thing for the bus as well. And whenever you add the shadows for cars or the buses, make sure you leave a little bit of highlights here and there. And I also saw that the bus was looking flat, so I want to create a plane, so I added a darker pigment at the back of the bus. As soon as we added that, you could see that the bus automatically become 3D. So it gives the 3D look, and it gives a really good form for the bus. So we are almost at the end of the painting. The only thing we need to get it done is the reflection. If you see in the reference, in reality there is no reflection. I thought it would be nicer to have some reflection. And sometimes I do this, take any credit card and put some pigment in your credit card and try to draw straight lines. I hate doing straight lines. Sometimes I do it and sometimes I try to avoid it because vanity prevents it. As an artist, I don't try to use a ruler or a scale in my painting. So I'm adding a little bit of details on the left hand side because it looked really empty, so I thought it would be nice to add the detail. And you can also see in the reference there is like a big streetlight pole exactly in our foreground. If I would have done this painting a year ago, I would have put all the street poles which is in the foreground. But later I realized that as a painter you're telling a story, and when some people see your painting, you're evoking emotion and telling a story. And as a painter, the success is when they see your painting, you have to feel that emotion in that place. But like the motive for this painting is I want to show that the Parliament building, and it's on a rainy day, and there's going to be a lot of reflection happening. So now sometimes whenever I don't see my painting coming along, and as soon as I add the eyelets, the whole painting coming alive. And since it's a snow scenes, there is a little bit of snow everywhere in our painting, so this also helps us to bring back bringing back the snow. For the white paint, you could use either gouache and Chinese white, both works. And gouache is kind of like brings since it's an opaque paint, it brings a little bit of highlights better than Chinese white. But if you use Chinese white, you use it fresh out of the tube, then adding any water in your brush, then you're in a good place. I'm also trying to add the details less as possible, because when you do painting, less is always more, and more is always really bad. I'll keep that in my mind whenever I'm adding details. I just wanna, when you add details, I want to thinking of bringing the details in the front and some details in the back. So I'll adding the highlights using white paint, and so this is the step which is going to make this painting as it is. So I flip the canvas and I wet the paper, and I put colors, darker colors in my watercolor paper, and I let it run. So before it dries out, I'm going to take white paint and for the reflection, and I'm going to introduce here and there in my painting. And you can see in the reflection I also introduced a little bit of red paint in it as well. And now I'm taking a pure pigment of red paint, and I'm going to bring back some of the highlights for the bus and as well as for the flag. So I painted this painting as it is, but I did add some details later. So now it's your turn to take my reference and come up with your own impressions, and let's see what you can come up with. Thanks again for watching this Parliament building watercolor tutorial with me. Let me know what you learned from this video and what's your favorite color in this painting. If you have any other requests or subjects you want me to cover in watercolors, write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or comment below. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And please do share with your friends and family. And good luck with your painting, folks.